One of the biggest regrets of my generally charmed life is that it took me 29.94 years to finally get my shit together and give it some structure. Because if time is money, I was spending it like a billionaire. Not stupidly, but as if I had endless amounts of it. Which I don't, because every time billionaire eventually goes bankrupt. I wish I'd put that first few hundred million worth of time to better use by investing it more wisely and preserving it in form of memories and knowledge. Which is what a system for structuring your life does. At least it does for me and the system that I've built for myself. Well, actually, built is the wrong word. Evolved. Because I don't think you can copy someone else's blueprint. I think the only way you can thrive with a system for structuring your life is if you evolve into it on your own. And to inspire you to do so, here's the evolutionary tale of the system I use and the beautiful beast that it's become. The first step of my life structuring systems evolution was like all of our ancient ancestor, the Tiktok's first step out of water.
The first vertebrate animals on land.
It was crude, risky, and adventurous. But unlike the Tiktok, my first step was inspired by a podcast. A director named Robert Rodriguez told Tim Ferriss that he keeps a log of every single thing he does every single day. Curious to see what happens if I did so myself, I gave it a try. Here's exactly what I wrote that momentous day of September 23rd, 2015. All in all, it took me 5 minutes to write? Not a lot, and nothing compared to the benefits I felt. Just like that calorie counting app MyFitnessPal does for food, writing down everything I do made me more mindful of how I consume my time. Most importantly, as it pertains to structuring your life, writing all this stuff down offloaded all the pieces from my messy, unreliable brain onto something else that I could begin to wrap my head around and organize. Then came the natural next step of my system's evolution. In addition to writing down what I did, I began to write down what I wanted to do. I put these to-dos atop the list of my daily log, tacking on new ones as they came up, then copy-pasting the ones I didn't do to the next day. Crude and simple, yes, but again, super beneficial. I wasted less of my seriously limited brain power trying to remember to-dos. I got motivation from the little dopamine hit of checking those boxes. I learned to break down big and vague projects into smaller individual actions, each with their own to-do. And I got a more realistic idea of what I could accomplish in one day. But not all of my to-dos needed to be done that very day or the next one. So that brought about the next evolutionary step of my system for structuring my life. Creating a new note with a list of future to-dos. Unsurprisingly, the number of items on this future to-do list grew out of hand faster than Australia's population of invasive cane toads.
Hey, look! Those frogs are eating all their crops!
Come to think of it, this analogy gives new meaning to Brian Tracy's famous eat the frog productivity advice. Anyway, I couldn't eat all my frogs at once, nor did I want to exterminate them all, so I had to corral them, which led to the next evolutionary step of my system for structuring my life. Sublists. To do this week, to do next week, to do this month, to do next month, to do eventually. The big benefit of this evolutionary step? It forced me to prioritize. Because I knew deep inside that anything on my to-do eventually list was like world peace. A nice idea, but realistically, never gonna happen. So if I really wanted something done, I needed to put it on a to-do list with a date attached to it. Again, you may think this is a super simple step, and maybe it was. But for me, it was a big leap. It was like that first landfish's distant descendant sprouting a lateral frontal pole on their brain. Because all of a sudden, more than structuring my days, I began structuring my weeks and months. It felt like I'd installed guide walls inside the Plinko board of my life, because the system kept me bouncing more or less in a predefined direction. But I was moving slowly and not hitting very many rewarding targets. Because checking off all these tiny little to-dos was like taking a swig of whiskey while camping on a cold night. It warmed me up on the inside and filled me with a temporary sense of comfort and satisfaction. So I lined up cheap to-dos like an unevolved sophomore frat boy at a grungy university bar during happy hour. Take out the trash? Check. Respond to mom's text. Easy. Check. Draft a new blog post? How about this one? Increase the font size of an existing post. Check! You get the idea. So when I look back at the damage I'd done, I didn't feel particularly proud of myself. My brain could hardly remember what happened with my time. But I had written it down, so it wasn't lost as a hazy memory like most drunken nights are. And this led to the next great evolutionary leap. Regular reviews. Every Sunday evening or Monday morning, I started reviewing the past week and planning the next one. Seeing all the cheap to-dos I'd slammed down gave me zero satisfaction. What made me feel like $1,000,000 was seeing that I'd done big things, stuff that builds on itself and lasts, like learning, creating, progress on big projects, or meaningful gatherings. And interesting things, stuff that spices up my life story and opens the door for serendipity, like making new connections, trying something unfamiliar, or going somewhere new. It was like a prehistoric herbivore who accidentally takes a bite out of his buddy's flesh and realizes, oh man, this stuff's got way more bang for my bite than grass does. So in the same way, weekly reviews move me up the food chain, motivating me to go after big kills and to leave little insubstantial to-dos for later when I'm feeling lazy or whatever. But as is often the case with speedy evolution, this move had an unanticipated downside. It got me working too much. I suspect it's because work-related kills are easier and quicker to take down than any meaningful gains in my personal life. Like for me, it's easier to make a video than to make a friend. So I needed to balance my diet and my structure. In my weekly reviews, I noticed I'd felt best when I made accomplishments in all the pillars of my life. Business, social life, my wife Kim, my son, and personal development. So just as I had corralled my out-of-control Australian toad-like to-do lists by date, I broke out each of those lists by silo. This reminded me to take care not to leave any of these pillars off my plate for too long. Also, inspired by two great books, Storyworthy and A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, I added another silo, memorable moments. Doing so reminds me to record memorable anecdotes that may otherwise vanish from my memory.
Yikes.
And it compels me to create more such moments, thereby making my life story more interesting. Speaking of interesting, doing weekly reviews is not. They take about 30 minutes for me to do, and I've never once looked forward to doing it. But they're no different from accounting for my expenses in that I know that they're worth doing. They reinforce my desire to invest my time wisely and give me a clearer idea of how to invest it next. This rationale led to my life structuring system's next evolutionary step, when I asked myself, why stop at weekly reviews? So I zoomed out another level to do monthly reviews and plans. For them, I reviewed my week summaries the same way that I reviewed my days for my weekly reviews. Then I zoomed out even further to do yearly reviews in which I reviewed my monthly reviews. Do you see the beautifully natural fractal trend here? My weekly, monthly, and yearly reviews were like blood vessels look like branches, which look like rivers. These zoomed out bigger picture reviews again generated more work for me, but also again, they generated outsized returns because they gave me perspective on what matters the most. Important but not urgent things like trips far away from the regular hustle and bustle, building new habits, and ambitious projects. These are the so-called quadrant 2 tasks of the Eisenhower matrix that I first read about in Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and then came across dozens of times in the YouTube channels of less successful productivity content creators. And now here too, I suppose. So on that note, it'd be fair of you to see me in my unimpressive life and ask, what good has all of this life structure that he's evolved done for him? And I feel ya. Honestly, I tend to feel disappointed by how few big and interesting things I accomplish in a given month or year. Part of that is probably just me always wanting more and never having enough. But I also think it's a sign that my system needs to continue evolving, which I'm sure it will. I'm also sure as hell not banishing my life structuring system to extinction. Because while I'm not anywhere close to setting the world on fire, I'm also not running around putting out fires anymore either. I feel way more in control of things and time than ever. Most importantly, my precious time doesn't feel like it's slipping through my fingers as fast as I used to. Because my life structuring system is capturing those sands of time and building them into something. And while it may not look like much right now, I'm optimistic for the future. So I bet you that my decade review is going to be pretty cool. And my 100-year review, it's going to be freaking incredible.